In a hotel room on an upper floor in downtown Auckland, investigators found something stranger than a crime scene: a phone, holding a string of search terms. Some entered hours before a young woman arrived that night, some entered after she was gone. It reads almost like a countdown. This is the story of Grace Millane, 26, traveling the world alone, matched with a stranger on a dating app on the night of her own birthday, in a city 11,000 miles from home. The answer was never hidden. It had been typed and saved, by the one person who assumed no one would ever look. Grace Millane grew up in England, the kind of daughter who called home more than she strictly had to. She'd just finished a psychology degree, and instead of walking straight into a career, she did what a lot of new graduates do: she bought a one-way ticket and set out to see the world before real life caught up with her. Friends describe her as thoughtful, a little shy with strangers at first, fiercely loyal once she trusted someone. Her family says she messaged constantly: flight landings, hostile Wi-Fi complaints, plans for whichever city came next. She'd already mapped out where she wanted to go after New Zealand, South America, then home in time to see her family again. Her father would later describe her as the planner of the family, the one who kept track of everyone else's schedules as carefully as her own, a trait that made the silence that came later feel so wrong to everyone who knew her. She wasn't traveling to escape anything. By every account, she was simply curious about the world, and confident enough to see it largely on her own terms. By the start of December 2018, her trip had brought her to Auckland, meant to be one stop among many. December 1st was her birthday. She spent part of that day the way she spent most days on the road, messaging home, sharing a few photos, having a quiet dinner with a friend she'd met earlier in her travels. That evening, like a huge number of travelers her age, in a city she barely knew, she opened a dating app. Not recklessness. The same ordinary curiosity that sends millions of people on a first date with someone they matched with online, in a new city, on an ordinary Saturday night. That night, Grace matched with a local man on the app. Court evidence would later identify him, Jesse Kempson. They messaged, then agreed to meet in the city center for drinks, a plan so unremarkable that neither of their friends thought twice about it. Cameras along Auckland's Central Bar Strip caught the two of them moving between venues over several hours that evening, the kind of footage that exists, unremarked and unwatched, for thousands of first dates on those same few blocks every single night. By every account gathered afterward, bar staff, other patrons, the footage itself, the evening looked, from the outside, entirely unremarkable. Nothing on any of those cameras showed a single warning sign to anyone watching in real time. Just before midnight, the two of them walked into a hotel a short distance from the bar district, the City Life Hotel, in the heart of downtown Auckland. Security cameras recorded them entering together. No camera in that building ever recorded Grace walking back out. Court records would later establish, factually and without dispute, what happened next. Sometime after midnight, inside that room, Grace died of strangulation. That finding came from the pathologist, and it was never contested at trial. At trial, the defense would argue what happened was a consensual act that went wrong. The jury heard that argument in full, and rejected it. What was still unknown, in that moment, was everything that happened in the 24 hours after. Grace had a habit her family could set a clock to: she never went quiet for long. When a day passed without a single message, then too, her father filed a missing person report with Auckland police. For a solo traveler on the other side of the world, that silence wasn't a red flag to her family, it was completely out of character. Friends back home noticed it too, in a group chat that had been active every day of her trip and had suddenly gone quiet. That report is what turned an ordinary dating app match into a homicide investigation. Detectives pulled hotel footage first, then widened the net: city cameras, retail records, rental agreements. A pattern surfaced. The same man seen with Grace at the hotel was recorded, the next day, buying a large storage tote from a superstore. Records show he also rented a car that day, a vehicle later traced, through toll records and traffic cameras, into the forested hills west of the city, the Waitakere Ranges. None of this alone proved anything. But side by side, a purchase, a rental, a direction of travel, it gave investigators a place to look. A dedicated search team was pulled together within days, canvassing retail staff, toll operators, and rental clerks for that same 24-hour window. 8 days after Grace was reported missing, search teams, supported by cadaver dogs and days of methodical grid searches through dense bush, located human remains buried in a shallow grave in the Waitakere Ranges, inside a suitcase. Her family was formally notified soon after. The location wasn't random. It matched, almost exactly, one of the last places records showed that rental car had traveled. With a location, a vehicle, and now a body, investigators turned to the one piece of evidence that could place intent alongside opportunity: the suspect's own phone. Forensic examiners extracted a complete search history off that phone, every query, time-stamped, going back weeks. They sorted it into a single timeline: everything searched before Grace ever arrived that night, and everything searched after she was gone. What they found wouldn't just describe a state of mind. Laid out in order, it would become the single most cited piece of evidence in the entire trial. Forensic software reconstructed every timestamp down to the minute, cross-referenced against cell tower data and the hotel's own keycard logs. Investigators don't often get a suspect's own timeline handed to them this directly. This time, they did. Here is what that timeline showed. In the hours before Grace ever walked into that hotel room, searches had been made for violent, non-consensual sexual content. In the hours after, the searches changed entirely. Where to buy a large storage container. How far a rental car could travel. The exact regional park where her remains would later be found. And somewhere in between, records show he went out again the very next evening, matched with someone else on the same app. None of this was a confession. But laid out second by second, in his own hand, it became something no defense argument could talk around: a documented account of exactly what he knew, and exactly when he knew it. He wasn't convicted despite his caution. He was convicted because the record he left behind did the investigators' work for them, one entry at a time. Almost a year later, in November 2019, after weeks of testimony and several days of jury deliberation, the trial concluded. The jury convicted him of murder. Because of a New Zealand court suppression order, his identity had been withheld from the public for months. Once the conviction came down, that order lifted, and the public finally learned the name behind the case: Jesse Kempson. In February 2020, he was sentenced to life in prison, with a minimum non-parole period of 17 years, among the longest minimum terms ever handed down for a murder conviction in that country. He appealed. Denied. He appealed again, to the Supreme Court, denied a second time. The conviction stands, fully and finally. After sentencing, several other women came forward publicly, describing earlier encounters with the same man that had turned frightening in similar ways. None of that changed the verdict. But it widened the picture, from one night, to a pattern that had gone unreported for years. Every avenue for challenging the conviction is now exhausted. Legally, the case is closed for good. Grace Millane went out on her birthday night the same way countless people do, every single day, hopeful, a little nervous, expecting nothing more than an ordinary date in a new city. What convicted the man responsible wasn't a lucky break, or a slip in a disguise. It was a documented, time-stamped record of his own choices, sitting in his pocket the entire time. Grace's family has continued to speak publicly in her memory, pushing for greater awareness around dating app safety for travelers on their own, and for how investigators and courts weigh digital evidence in cases just like this one. Nothing about that awareness changes what her family lost. But it's the part of this case that outlasted the trial, a documented account, still being used, still being cited, long after the verdict came down. If cases like this, where the evidence was there from the very beginning, hold your attention, subscribe to Crimson Ledger for the next documented investigation.